Welcome. I know some of you have joined from South America. I know that people are on YouTube and so forth, so that's fantastic. It's just that I couldn't get into the thing. Welcome. My name is Bashir Fancy. I'm the president at the BIZTEK, which is Business and Technology Professional Association of Canada. Some of you I had looked earlier, I know you well. Anyway, we are really excited that our guest, Toufi Saliba, has landed safely at his destination, and which is good because the flight was delayed and so forth. Anyway, the good news is he's there. So let me tell you very briefly about him, then he'll tell you. The subject today is the global AI standards. So the artificial intelligence, we know that there is potential of good, bad, and the ugly, but let's talk about Toufi himself, then we get into that. So Toufi is the chair of the IEEE Artificial Intelligence Global. So he's working, getting the standards together. But some of you have heard me joke about people when they use buzzwords and don't know, and I say they're 1 mile wide and half inch deep. Well, Toufi's 10 miles wide and 10 miles deep. He's got an extensive background. His background, is not only just with this. He's been building networks in many countries. He's CEO at the Privacy Shell organization. He was the former chair of the ACM that everybody knows globally, the Practitioners Board Conference Committee. His background in machine learning, autonomous, decentralized governance, distributed computing, cryptography, but I'll let him tell you more. Basically, he's a guru on this, trust me. You're having the best of the best talk to you today. So I will set a question and let him give you background and then address it. So Toufi, one of the things is artificial intelligence, as we've talked about, can play a fantastic role. And it can also be not the best, depending on how it's managed or dealt with or implemented. Why don't you set the stage for what the challenges are and also give you a background?
Sure. Thanks, Bashir, and thanks for having me here. It's quite exciting to see some of your show that you basically literally started a couple of months ago, and I saw some phenomenal set of folks that they've attended, and it's exciting to see that you're driving towards this mission of bringing more and more awareness. Without awareness, I don't think anything can be as meaningful when people they know where they're heading. My background, I sit in 3 different tiers. There's my background as an entrepreneur, background as a technologist, mainly AI, and thirdly is more in cryptography. And when it comes to AI and cryptography, like one of my mentors would say, it's more like Romeo and Juliet. There's always that love thing. And but when it comes to as an entrepreneur, I've built 15 startups in my life, and I failed 11 of them, and I'm not shy to say that. And I've succeeded 3, and I have several others that I'm working on right now with Toda Network, where we have over 25 projects being built on Toda. So I have a lot of confidence in building systems, and I focus more on the resiliency. So when it comes to my background, when I look at certain things that used to worry me a lot for the last 20 years, I'd say, is are we going to get towards the true global prosperity? And I feel today I'm confident that we are heading towards global prosperity. And what I mean by that is the poorest of the poor in the world will be able to afford sanitary food and shelter and health and so on and so forth. And I feel a lot of effort that has been done by many people across the globe that's getting us there. So it's fascinating to see that. However, I think we can have this perhaps on another talk when you did ask me which one I want to focus on, because I'm the author of Toda protocol, and we can talk a lot about Toda. Toda is truly a network protocol, and we look at the creators of TCP/IP as more like our grandfathers in a way, and we we want to bring something down to the network as protocol as possible. Unlike many folks that they use the word protocol too lightly, but they refer to some sort of like system that you have to, as the third party. We want to eliminate the third party in communication. And the goal with that is to reduce the friction. When you reduce the friction by over 99% in transmitting value or managing value, then you can have something revolutionary. Without that, if it's only reduction 20-30%, it won't be revolutionary. So that's what we stand for when it comes to TODA. So for the listeners, those that they know about TODA IP, they probably already know that, and we can save that for another talk. I think the goal of this talk is to focus a bit more on the AI standards. What's my mission with the IEEE, and why did I choose to do the AI standards? So when it comes to prior to the IEEE, I did serve a term with the ACM, the Association for Computing Machinery, which is known to be the #1 computer science in the world. And with that, I did as the global chair for the practitioners board and the conference committee. And with that, I was just able to get several times conferences having hundreds of people attending, and the intent there is to get cryptographers, cybersecurity folks with AI folks in the same room and get them to talk and see where things can transpire. Well, when it comes to the IEEE, initially the president asked me if I can do something the same for the IEEE, and I said no, I want to do something different. And I came in with a proposal of what do we truly need and how we can go about it. And so far, the very first time I mentioned it to folks, so the deeper they are in AI, the more they feel that should not be the case. We don't have that issue. But the more they understand it, the more they realize that it is one of the biggest existential threat that we have on this planet. So we can ignore it and say someone else would resolve it, but the reality remains. It is one of the biggest existential threats. And what do we mean by that? I am not like those that talk about AI as if it's like this thing's gonna come and eat us, take our jobs, or it's let's fear AI or whatnot. This is not what I talk about. In fact, I actually encourage folks to build a lot of AI systems. It can make life a lot better for humanity. But something with tremendous amount of power can be abused from within. And what do we mean by that is that can you build an AI system that you can repurpose it today? If you ask any AI scientist and they say, no, it cannot be, they're lying or they don't know what they're talking about. Every single AI system that is being built today can be repurposed. And if it can be repurposed, it will be repurposed. That's the nature of Homo sapien. If you're giving it to a certain government without necessarily mentioning the name of government, 70% of the world don't trust their own governments. That government can repurpose it and can use it against the people. We don't build things against people. And when we bring that awareness to AI folks and they realize that, you know what, we want to build certain preventions, and how can we go about it? Well, if we knew as a Homo sapien, if we knew how to go about it, we wouldn't be building, AI standards body and research and so on and so forth. We would just be telling folks how to do it. We don't know. Nobody knows how to do it. But is it worth trying? Do we have enough signals to feel that we can build something that enabling AI scientists and computer scientists across the globe, when they're building AI systems, to build it in such a way that it cannot be repurposed? And the answer is yes, and it's definitely worth it. I mean, it's the lifeline of our species, and we owe it for next generations and so on and so forth. So we're going for it for the benefit of all Homo sapien and not a single group. But at the same time, when you do something that is working to the benefit of all Homo sapien in general, it's the only driver is altruism, and that's dangerous, extremely dangerous, because altruism only constitutes about 2% of what makes us us. So we we're figuring out a lot of ways to incorporate additional drivers that get people to wake up every day at 6 a.m. in the morning and help driving that mission forward. And those, they incorporate the greed, fear, need, safety, and then of course, love and altruism can be added into the equation. So by having all of those drivers, it can get a lot of folks to work towards a common goal that can benefit all humanity. So effectively, if you were to have a metaphorical example of what does that resemble, like when it comes to technology, this is making the water cleaner. Everybody can benefit from it. If we figure out a way to make water cleaner for everyone on the planet, everybody can benefit from it. And effectively want to do that for AI systems so that they cannot be repurposed. And like anything that I've done in my life, you get a lot of folks that they just get to be haters and they tell you why it shouldn't work. But at the same time, I'm lucky enough to get a lot of people that they say, you know what, I'm going to help make it work. I'm not here to tell you why it doesn't work. I'm here to actually help you make it, bring it to reality, because I believe in that goal. And when people believe in that goal and work towards that goal, they feel good about themselves too, and we all feel good about it. It's just your the continuum or life of our species can have a better life with the utilizations of AI that can bring a tremendous amount of prosperity and health and so on and so forth to people, as opposed to leaving a gap there that can be attacked from within. And I give a lot of examples, of course, and I've written some articles long before COVID that people during COVID would be like, "Ooh, did you know about this? It's coming." I'm like, "No, I did not." It's like, but I could see that events like that can trigger certain parties to abuse the system in a certain way.
So that's actually pretty decent introductions, which is very good. And we can probably drill down to, because you said a couple of very important things. The one that comes to mind, and I've seen it on cybersecurity side for a long time, which is that when the business went to the security folks to get something done, the security said, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do this. Rather than actually saying, let's work together to see how you can do it more securely. So the organization got the benefit, the marketing got the benefit, the product got the benefit, customer got. A lot of the guys in security didn't do that. They stopped and said, no, you can't do this. The result of that was it was never going to stop. People bypassed the security folks and they did it anyway. Then we ran into trouble, and they went back to security. Can you fix it? So we don't want that to happen with AI. We would rather, right? We want AI to work. So now you introduced it it's a very good point. That your point is that we should embrace that because it can really help. Especially if you look at even the routine tasks in business, right? Today we do that. One of the things that I found is if you get good people to do routine tasks all the time, they stop thinking because they're doing the same thing again and again and again, and you get lazy. And when you get lazy, you stop thinking, and then you get hit because you're not thinking differently now, right? And I don't mean to be mean. I tell people many times. Somebody tells me this guy's got 40 years experience, and I tell him no, he doesn't. He's got 1 year experience and 39 years of repeating it because that's all he's doing all the time, right? But if he was doing different things, so now in that light, given that we need to if we were able to take some of the routine tasks which are low risk completely, and would it not work for corporations and everybody, human beings? Because now you're making them do interesting things, making them do tasks which are going to actually pay them reasonably well, but they can look after their families better, but they are also excited because they want to improve. What do you think about that?
Well, so I think the actual fear factor can sometimes drive a lot of folks when you have the chief security officer or information security officer talking to the CEO about those kind of things. And sometimes fear can get a certain budget to be allocated, and then they start driving towards it. But I find what we're talking about it's driving a lot more the two extremes. The CEO themselves, because they want to get towards profitability, and the people they're working in the organization, they want to feel meaningful. They want to feel needed. They don't want to feel that they're actually they're doing just a job that they know that they could be replaced by the machine, but let's keep it hush hush because they need to pay the bills or whatnot. But they feel the irrelevancy of what they're doing, instead bringing in that relevancy back and getting them to do something that it's phenomenal, that can be adding value. So those two extremes are the ones that have been driving towards. And what do I mean by that? Let's start with the CEO. So the CEO of any company today, they want to continue or being ahead of the curve when it comes to their competitors, building things that at the end of the day, the people on the ground are gonna need it. People on the ground, they're gonna want it. And I gave this example of something that it's called the pill, and I want people to follow with that example here to see the ending of it and not make conclusion halfway through. Today, the smartphone, that's how the smartphone looks like. You can attach it to yourself or you can detach it. I predicted by 2030, but it's looking like it's going to be a lot earlier.
Really?
That smartphone is going to be a pill you take every Friday. Okay, so it's going to be embedded in you, whether it's like Neuralink or a combination of what's embedded in you, and that pill that you take to charge it or whatnot, or update it every Friday or every Thursday or every day. Effectively, that reality is coming, and I'm not building that pill. That is coming, with or without me existing as part of this equation. Now, if you think of the technology that it's embedded within people, when it has the same capability that it has today, it can still be managed, no problem. To a certain extent, you can add some regulatory compliance on it. But we're talking about certain systems that the evolution of AI is getting them to the point where those components that they're embedded in you, they have maybe 1 million times more intelligence than you, but they are inside you. Yet, that's okay, which is good. This is probably very good because you get to work together. The hybrid model, we call it, the hybrid intelligence. That's good. But now when you think about it, that how many companies can control this thing more than you can control it? Sure, they can promise you that, like, Bashir, we will not. Come on, you trust us. We are Verizon. We're T-Mobile. We are IBM. Trust us. Okay. We've seen where that trust led us in the past, in very small things like privacy. But now we're talking about free will, the willpower. Imagine that can be taken away from you by having a single entity having control over this thing. That single entity could be government, that they may decide that they know what's good for you better than what you know yourself. And philosophically, some people, they might say, well, that's a good thing. Well, if it is, then give it to your daughter or your son or your niece. Would you? Would you give that pill to somebody in the next generation, knowing that there's a central entity that can control for life? They can control what time they wake up, what do they eat, when do they kill themselves, or they don't kill themselves, or whether they live or die, or what kind of job they do, everything, pretty much. Taking that control away, even if philosophically it would make sense on an economical level at some point in the future, from now until then, taking that control away can lead into catastrophic results, because there's a lot of bad things that could happen to a lot of people in one shot. Like Elon Musk describes it, that this is a lot more powerful than nuclear warheads, but yet we're not building proper security around it. So effectively, when it comes to this kind of stuff and the level of power that we're building, when CEOs across the globe, they listen to this and they feel like, okay, we hear you so far, that's great, but what's in it for me? This is more like a CSO discussion or CISO discussion, the Chief Security Officer, Chief Information Security Officer. Like, wait, I haven't finished yet, wait. Whatever product that you are building, the public, your customer, your business customer or your consumer as a user, whatnot, they will know that there's a competitor that's going to give them the exact same product as you are giving them, but that competitor product cannot allow that central company or entity or any entity to control it. It's just the host will control it every single time. Checkmate. You're out. Doesn't matter what you're doing. As a CEO, you don't exist anymore, whether you're running a bank or you're running a phone company or whatnot. If your competitor are doing it that way, and they tell the world, you're not going to exist anymore, because nobody's going to buy your phone, nobody's going to buy your banking system, nobody's going to buy your app, nobody's going to buy your game, nobody's going to do anything that you're doing, because your competitor, they already have a product that cannot be repurposed, and therefore it cannot be attacked from within. So now the CEO would start thinking like, holy shit, I want to be that competitor. The president of a nation would be like, I want to be there first. If I don't get there first, I'm not going to get reelected, or I'm not going to even get to the election, or whoever's running for election will be like, this is the system that I want to bring to our people, and so on and so forth. So when people know that this exists, they are going to go for it because it's better for their own children. It's something that they would give it to their own children safely. They feel that it cannot be repurposed, cannot be attacked. Only the host can control it. In the absence of this, if this doesn't exist, if I never existed on this planet and you've never heard of those possibilities, all you heard about is a pill that can be controlled by a third party, you'll be taking it. You will be taking it. If you don't take it, then you're not going to remain competitive in in any market. So for that reason, a lot of people, they feel like, well, then the easiest way is to eliminate you from existence, Toufi Saliba. Then you can continue doing what you're doing. That's the easiest way. But then when you remind them that what you're leaving behind is that their children is going to be taking those pills, they're not going to be safe, they're not going to be their children anymore, and so on and so forth, they feel like, holy shit, we don't want to leave that future to the future of humanity. So it's a combination of like the greed, we want to dominate the market, the fear, we don't want to lose the market, and then the safety, we don't want to give something to our children that is not safe, and so on and so forth. So combining all of those aspects, then you add the additional altruism and love, then you get all of the components that gets people to wake up every morning and feel like, you know what, I want to participate in this mission and I want to work towards, sign me up, like what do I do? There's this guy, like, he's asking me like, okay, he convinced me, what does he want next? Does he want like my money? I'm not taking anybody's money. Let's put it this way. This is one of those missions that I spend a lot towards that goal. And if anything, if folks, they want to participate in that, they can march with me towards that. Like the research centers that we're building, they're costing hundreds of millions of dollars, and there are people, they're already marching in that direction. So whoever is capable of driving that direction, and they feel like they know, if you know in this world, everybody, hear the statement, if you know and you're capable, you're responsible. You are. So effectively, I told you, you can now decide that, oh, well, I don't want to believe him. Well, then go ahead and verify. Then you find out that it's true. Then you know. And if you are capable, then you're responsible. Then everybody, we need to, the more you're capable, the more you're responsible. So effectively, it is a responsibility on all of us.
And that's where the ethics come in.
Right, right. And then when it comes to ethics, like a lot of folks, they think that at some point we can put ethics on AI, but be careful. I mean, ethics on current systems can barely work. Like imagine ethics on a system that is like 1 million times more intelligent than the host. So It's just like, and what kind of ethics? Like the ethics of Saudi Arabia, they're different than the ethics of Netherlands. Who's driving it? They're, you know, like there's certain things that we need to be very careful not to invest a lot of our effort in, because they will lead us into even more conflicts. But there are some other things that are beneficial to all of us, every single Homo sapien. Let's do those first. Let's do the biggest security threat that could be coming against each and every one of us first. Then we can talk about, you know, all the other stuff. Sure, you know, people, they might want to preserve certain culture in some place, some other culture. That's totally cool. Certain religion someplace, some other religion, another secular, another. That's fine. All of those are feel like they are secondary, but there's the basis. Let's take care of the basis, guys.
Right, right.
Yeah.
You touched very importantly, because as we grew up, our parents instilled values, what you just talked about, and they stayed with us all our lives about what is right, what is wrong. And I think you articulated that very well. Here's you could probably let's look at a couple of examples. You gave a very powerful one down the line that people need to seriously think about, and saying it's not that it's whether it's possible or not, it's going to happen, like you said. Whether we like it, don't like it, it's happening. So now we better get our hands around it and then guide it, you know,
right,
or we'll be chasing it and we'll get in trouble. Here's the thing. I was watching a program, I think it was out of Europe. I don't know if the BBC had sponsored, or they had 5-6 people on artificial intelligence in different parts of the world. And one of the examples that came up was the police department in the US actually had been using AI. And because the way it was set up, they were 9 times out of 10 likely to stop a black guy who had possession of drugs, not for selling, for himself. But there was the other guy who had actually committed murder, was not black, never stopped, because the way the artificial intelligence was looking at it. So what you're talking about, how it's manipulated, it's happening already, right?
Well, I mean,
in a different way, not maybe not overtly. Let's say covertly, because the algorithm maybe. What do you think about that? As that's what they were talking about anyway.
Well, I mean, the false positive that many of those primitive AI systems end up generating, they end up causing a lot of mistrust in what is yet to come in AI, and that certainly happens every single industry across the globe. At the end of the day, those are issues that they can be addressed by getting AI to be better than a human investigator or whatnot, or detector. So, you know, like, let's say that there's 100 criminals that they get away with killing, you know, I don't know, like, let's say students per year. They just with the help of AI, certainly you can reduce that, you know, to 10 to 1. And the better the AI system, the more you can reduce that, and effectively, and not being biased towards like the color, religion, or and so on and so forth. Those are coming. I have no doubt about that. I feel that there are a lot of researchers that they know a lot more than me when it comes to those kind of things. And I partner with some of them, like Ben Gortzel. He knows a lot about those kind of things. But I tend to focus on the aspects that nobody's really looking to address at this point, and that they can be existential threat, and not necessarily just like one aspect. It's more so like how let's take that. Let's go back to that pill as an example. So let's say, you know, you have you know, 150 million people in the United States, they've taken that pill. Okay. There are more than that using a smartphone today. So it's very reasonable to think that the 150 million people can be controlled by a single entity. If you tell them that that single entity could be Verizon, and then they all decide to trust Verizon, they might be okay for a bit. If you tell them that that single entity could one day be China, will they be okay? Or vice versa? If you tell the Chinese government that the 780 million people using the pill that they thought that it's very well done or whatnot in China can be controlled by Donald Trump, would you like that? I mean, they probably prefer Biden at that point, but I'm just saying, it would be, that's a preference of like what, but you know what I mean? I mean, it's just, it's something that can, if you start thinking from that perspective, then you start bringing in the guys with the big guns, basically the defense folks, and they've contacted me several times from many different parties across the globe, and they're trying to do this on a defense level, and I'm trying to resist the temptations to actually responding to those, because this can truly be done a lot better if it's done driven by certain corporate, like that example that I gave you. The CEO that is looking for more profit will end up building a much better product than having it to be driven by a certain defense versus the other defense. Like we're not here to go towards the war. We need to prevent certain systems from attacking the Homo sapien that can be your children or your niece or whoever is the next generation, or your own pedigree, or what you brought to this planet before you're gone. You received it in a certain way. Do you want to leave it to be worse than what it was? I mean, nobody wants that, right? So, I mean, some psycho people, they would want that, but in general, most people don't want that. So I feel that's the aspect that I would want to bring into the equation, and I give a lot of credit to other people that are addressing the other aspects, like the one that you mentioned, and that they know a lot more about that.
So this leads to, this is very interesting, because we talked about you're working on standards, which should obviously take everything into account, so then you would then build the standards to make sure bad things don't happen. Doesn't this mean then that for this to work well, and for corporate world, for the humankind, which is exactly where you're taking it, which is fantastic, is that we're going to need bloody good governance, and global, in fact, not governance which has got oversight in one place, but really universal oversight and governance, where, and if we're going to do that, there's also parts about education awareness, right? Because like if you're into the third world country where people may not be aware of that, so we want to make sure that that is happening. But isn't governance going to be a very big issue here?
Absolutely. And like one of our attendees mentioned here, there is a commonality between all of us Homo sapiens that we could agree on: don't hit me and don't take my stuff, type of thing. So there's some commonalities between all of us. And if you look at what do we all wish on next generation, what would you give them? A glass of water that the water is not clean? Or if you have the option, you would probably give them the cleaner water. So we do have a lot of commonality from that perspective. So certainly the governance can play a role in that, in here. But when it comes to the actual governance, the one thing that I would like to remind folks that I'm actually, a lot of folks, they got to know me, they start calling me the anti-blockchainer, because there's a lot of folks in the blockchain space, they're like, let's do the governance model. They kind of try to reinvent the wheel that, like, for example, the banks do much better than them, but they feel like, oh, let's do some sort of governance. We can bring 100 people on the table, and then we call that decentralized. This is not what I'm talking about at all. So I think when it comes to the governments, there's a lot of methods in the autonomous decentralized governance. The effectiveness of it is not only that it adds security. So if we live in a world, hypothetically, that there's this entire planet, let's say there's a country in this planet. So let's call this country Iceland or Lebanon or whatever, some crazy country. So if you have this country that everybody trusts that country, and then you give the governance of that pill to that country because you all trusted that they will not, no matter what, they will not change its course of action. They will not repurpose it. So when you do take the pill, so let me give you some actual examples of what those pills can do.
Yeah.
One of the things that those pills they'll be able to do would be like, as I'm talking to you right now, you mentioned the name Nick, and then instead of me typing to see, let's say, who's Nick, I'd run a search internally, and it runs the search and gives me like, this is Nick Brown that you were talking about, and I'm able to get to see the picture of that Nick Brown, and then how I interact with him, like, oh, okay, I know who that gentleman is, right? That's the kind of feature. This is amazing, amazing stuff, great stuff. We want the stuff for everybody. Now, here's the repurposing of it. As I'm actually calling up to that search, somebody would repurpose the actual thing. Then now, instead of giving me Nick Brown, it's going to give me someone else that, let's say, in a very simple example, somebody who's actually paid to replace Nick Brown's job, or paid to make Nick Brown look a really bad person, and it's going to show me, it's like, oh, Nick Brown, that's the person who got in a car accident in 2002 and hit the other person in the face. That's all I see about him, because although maybe it's true, but we've all gone through the conflicts once in our life, but that's all they want to show me about that person. They're repurposing it, and they can repurpose it today. They can. It's not like, it's not, there is no AI scientist in the world that say, no, they cannot. No, here's what they can say. They will not, because they have some certain governance internally. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a governance model that it's autonomous decentralized governance, where they cannot change it. Because when I actually got that software in that system installed in me, I got it in a way that it's going to do search in a certain way, and it cannot, like, they will have to come in and ask me at the time that I'm saying, like, hey, there's someone that's trying to actually show you something else, or someone paid for this thing, or some government's trying to mess with your brain or whatnot. Do you allow that? Then you can actually make a consent at that point to see if you want to allow that repurposing. But that's not what's being built. Again, do you see the difference now? Like, yes, what we're talking about. And I gave a very simple example. Like, imagine that on a daily basis in everything that you do, in what time you wake up, and who do you work for, and who do you report to, and when do you go to eat your sandwich, and how much you put ketchup, and how much you put mayonnaise, and so on and so forth, all of those things. And it's just,
yeah. Now, there's a question, but before I go to the question, this same thing, what you just talked about, right? I guess if done properly, with all the ethics and all the good rules in place, and right people doing it, you could actually help the person with Alzheimer's, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who can't remember, or person who has a,
absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
So be very powerful on that side, as long as it's done the way you're talking about. So where is the starting point? We're trying to get this AI standard. Where do you start with this now?
So I elected South Korea to be the headquarters for the research center for the AI standards for many reasons. Yeah. And effectively, we're getting a lot of folks in South Korea that they're providing some necessary elements into what it needs for it to exist, whether it is location, that they provide us with a location for 10 years, 10,000 square feet without any rent or whatnot. Other folks, they provide us with access to some researchers that they're paid by some other institute. At the same time, there are a lot of like big corporations that they're feeling that they will miss the boat if they don't getting into that. So the discussion started with some of those that they would want to sponsor some of that research, as long as they're able to, at the end of the day, like I said before, they're able to profit. And I've got nothing against profit, you know, like those guys that they're going to know ahead of the curve of how to build their system, how to build, let's say, certain banking system in a way that it's preserving that right to people and it cannot be repurposed. They're going to wipe out everyone else. They're going to win at the end of the day. You know, good for them. That's great. And there are other folks. There are technology folks, the big technology corporations. I mean, I'm not disclosing anybody at this point, and I don't know if we will ever disclose. We will keep things as confidential as possible, but we're certainly open to discuss with like also sovereign funds. We've you know, have 3 different sovereign funds that we talked to, that they tried initially to say that they would, well, one of them tried to say that they would put this under certain conditions, that they would want to change some of the requirements. No, this science is only requirements. We're not interested. We cannot get a couple hundred researchers, they're dropping all their life to work on this thing and the entire planet to follow certain requirements that could introduce a certain backdoor to somebody. That's not going to happen. The only way that this is going to happen is exactly how we're stating it. We want standards that cannot be, the standards so that can enable AI developers anywhere on the planet to build AI that cannot be repurposed. That's the goal. So whatever scientific methods and research that is required for each and every vertical in AI and for combination of verticals, let the scientists do their job properly without intruding into the requirements. We don't want to intrude into, you know, we don't want to start getting intruded into the specifications using our requirements. That's not fair either. So we just want to, I mean, look, I mean, throughout my life, I've been always like an instigator and I launch things, whether it's in front line or behind the scenes or whatnot. But when this thing is launched and it's ready to go, it would certainly be someone else who would be much more on an operational level. I happen to know my strengths and know my weaknesses. So when it comes to operation skills, organization skills, administrative skills, like, I mean, you know, all of those kind of, you name it, like if you pick up a random dude from across the street who would likely have better skills than me in those kind of stuff. So I focus on what I'm good at, and building, you know, resilient system design is what I'm good at. You know, the ability to read talent and see their potential in people in the first like 3 minutes, you know. So I use my unfair advantage and my strengths to get this initiative launched. But once it's launched and it's ready to go, there will be a lot more people that they, you know, much more operation driven and organized and so on and so forth. So that's we're also like lining up those people ahead of time as well.
I don't see that as an unfair advantage, and you as an instigator, because that's my career. In fact, when I got this Employee of the Year back in Canada, 100 years ago, one of the questions that as I came to the stage, and I tell you only this because I want to emphasize the point you made. So he said to me, "It's fantastic." The chairperson, who's now since passed away, and he said, "What do you owe your success to?" And I turned the mic off and I leaned back to him the other way, and I said, "I broke every single rule." Right? And I turned the mic back on. He said, "You better explain to me afterwards." And what I was talking about is I did the right ethical things.
Right.
But I didn't follow the Mickey Mouse blindly rules. Right.
And you man up to it at the end. And that's, I did the same with the ACM. I tell you that. And people at ACM, they would tell you that's like, you know, this guy get a lot of stuff done, but if you were to follow like the ACM certain standards or books or whatever, it would have taken him 6 years.
Correct.
To do anything.
It was joke, because to get anything done, to get the approval of 300 people, including the guy who was cleaning the kitchen and whatever, had to sign off, which made no sense. But that's the process, how it was. Nobody wanted to change it. And I bypassed that whole thing and got the thing done. And in the end, they were shocked because the project had gone on. Because I told them I got the approval. Anyway, I was heading there. The point being, I think what you call instigator, I call initiative. I call it outside the box. You break the rules, but you must be ethical.
100%.
Right? And that's 100%. So I think that's fantastic. Now that takes me to the profit thing. So because I want you to really address that. A line that N. Kevorkian has used many times on privacy, and we've had many discussions on this, I think is absolutely correct. Making profit must not be a zero-sum game. It can't come at the expense of, like in US, we now have 40% or whatever, some significant portion has gone into the poverty level, while you see Jeff Bezos' thing went up by 40 billion, right? At the time when people are struggling. So it's not that you're against somebody making profit, but when you start,
we want to raise the bar. We want to raise the bar for everybody, right?
Exactly.
So when you're creating a new value to humanity, here's the thing: if we all die today, and there's only the two of us alive, and you walk around, you see there's a lot of things that have been done on this planet as opposed to being deserted. The point here is that there's a lot of cumulative things that we add to this planet. So let's figure out a way where we can add a lot of those, and all of us benefit from the delta. There's nothing wrong with that. The mentality of win-lose, people that they still think of win-lose, they will lose, guaranteed.
Yes.
The reason why the folks, they win-win, they will win at the end, and the reason why I have a lot of faith in humanity is because the good people, they can work well together. The bad people, they screw each other at the end of the day.
Correct.
The bad people, they're thinking of how they're going to win and let you and I lose. They end up doing that same deal with each other and end up like losing. So it's just, you know, and back to the point of profitability, I want to touch on that. It's actually tremendous amount of profit. But before we get to that, when you mentioned that, like what you've done, was that like Visa or Air Canada or which company you said?
Air Canada.
Visa
had the full authority to do things, and that was phenomenal because I got a lot of things done.
Very cool. Because you were the CSO for Visa, right?
No, I was the executive vice president of risk management, security, and I was also the head of internal audit. So
amazing.
My boss was chairman. So I was. That's where we started the PCI standards, and it was very interesting to deal with the problem. But you look around today, and people lost sight of the standard. Why we did it? Everybody needs to know what to do with their ticking boxes, rather than understanding. Hey, it's the principle. If the principle was not putting a lock on the door, was you could buy $1 lock. It was to actually prevent bad guys getting in and taking data. So it was really to prevent that. But what has happened, we had to be prescriptive. So you're absolutely correct. What has happened is we tell people what to do. If you go in the corporate world, that's the danger with the bad part about the AI, because a lot of people know what to do, but they don't know the why they're doing it.
Right. So adding to that, and I think before we get into that, I want to touch a little bit about like that things of ethical thing that you've worked on. Because spoiler alert here, which we will cover in the next session with you, because I've been working with a bunch of PR folks on that to set it up properly. So for the last 12 years, 4 months, and 20 days, I myself exited from the entire banking system. I don't exist anywhere, but I continue to operate. And the point here that we're trying to make why getting back into the entire banking system is that we documented through this entire period, and it's basically showing how this additional friction that is being used on people, using myself as an example, it's not like a third person or whatnot, that I've done everything ethical, legal, and so on and so forth, but how a criminal could have done it. The point here is that when you're adding all of this friction that people added, like, you know, KYC, this and that, or whatever, you're adding it to the innocent while the criminal is getting away with things, you know? But this can be reduced, all of this friction can be reduced tremendously. And what's happening over the next couple of years, a tremendous amount of wealth is going to be added to the entire population of planet, because a lot of that friction is going to be reduced tremendously. So when it comes to the profit, when it comes to building AI systems, that they have this kind of security by design. So if you think of, let's say you're the CEO of like JP Morgan or Microsoft or whatnot, and you'd be like, you know what, I hear about those guys doing these things, like I want to know how real it is. And you end up sending like couple, you know, douchebag managers usually to look at those kind of things, and these guys, all their job is to find the reason why things shouldn't exist, and they come back and report, oh, that's not going to work. Then you hear about it again from someone else who's credible, then you're like, oh, I need to send someone else, and then finally you send the right side people. Then you put your mind into it, and you'd be like, okay, now I get it. I want to be building products for the people. Now remember, the winners of the internet are the people are those that they focus on the users. The winners of mobile are the ones that focus on users. Steve Jobs, you name it. Okay.
That's correct.
Now the entire digital world became the people. It's the same thing. The hybrid. We're talking about the hybrid. So those that are not focused on the people, they're going to be flagged out. They're going to miss that boat, and then it's going to be too late to jump back on that boat. So imagine, and I gave an example, JP Morgan, because it is not JP Morgan, but I'm not going to say who, but anyway, you know what I mean? Like they would basically be like, I really need to know how real can we get with that? And if it's 1% chance, imagine just 1% chance that we are going to get it right. It's going to continue our existence. We're going to deliver to all of our shareholders. We're going to become heroes, and it's going to wipe out all of those competitors that they are taking away from the next generations. They are actually installing systems going to take away from people. We're not. We're far better because we decided to adopt into something that is the future. So effectively, that's how you end up selling a lot more. That's if you are like a bank. Now imagine if you're a software company and you're Microsoft and you're doing that the same for all of your games. Would you give any of those games to your grandchildren, whoever is that at the time that would be looking to buy a game, install it in there, but it can be repurposed by somebody? Hell no. Oh. But if you hear that, like, oh, well, guess what? Actually, Microsoft, they started this, with the research back in 2020, supposedly the worst year in humanity, but that's when they started doing this kind of stuff. And now in 2026, they're already rolling those games with the highest amount of security by design. We call security by design, cannot be repurposed. It's efficient. It does it without having to rely on that third party. Remember when I said, imagine there's that third party. If it's a country that you trust that is doing all of those things, we don't need that autonomous decentralized governance. But we don't have that. We're humanity. Let's accept who we are. We will never have a central entity that we will all trust. We will not have that. And yet we need to work cooperatively. So that's why autonomous decentralized governance is going to come in super duper handy. And that's what's going to bring the profitability, where you're going to be able to sell, your competitors are not going to be able to sell.
You could actually give share and value to your own staff. The others buy it, but as part of their performance, they are doing it so that they got skin in the game.
Right.
It's very interesting. You were talking about, would you do that? Would you trust? I nearly trusted the president. Almost brought Lysol to drink to avoid, COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
Nearly did it. No, just kidding.
Okay.
No.
I was about to just hang up.
No, Lysol. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
I was trying to be funny, but I think
the poor guy, though, like, he's been blamed for everything anyway. Honestly, I'm not into politics at all.
No, it was just a joke.
I try to see things a little bit more objective. I like people to be united, as opposed to hating each other. I don't like to see that hate.
It was just to lighten, because
sure.
But the thing is, he does actually make us laugh. That you have to give him credit for that. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So we know where we start. The AI, and there's obviously, from what you just said, there's a lot of work to be done, obviously, right? And the more people, the more input, the more cases that you see, what can possibly, bad thing can be happening. The standards can help stop that, educate people, but also take advantage of it on the good side, because there's plenty of good to be done here, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so it's not what you have said. Your entire message here today is don't stop it. Just get involved.
Right.
So guide it in the right place, because that's the mistake we made on security. And I tell people, by the way, the crooks, you have to be, as a corporate world, you have to be successful and lucky 100% of the times. The bad guys have to be successful only once.
Right.
And they're in, and now you got a problem, right?
Right.
Right. So that's the thinking, that was just one thing or whatever it was. This means we need to reinvent, reimagine the business, the future model, basically, is what you outlined, right?
Absolutely. And it's something that folks to think of today and not tomorrow, not next year. It's just it would be too late. A lot of the AI folks, they're so versed in building AI, and they think someone else will take care of those things. I can assure you that if it's not security by design, which means it has to be by design of the actual or of the system itself, it won't work. So there are a lot of things of how we have certain proofs that we've proven ourselves that it can work with the TODA IP for certain aspects. But when it comes to AI in general, it would require like a lot of research, and that's why, like, you know, I spend a lot of time and effort to get that initiative up and running. Super exciting to see the things coming together. You will see some signing ceremonies more in November coming out of South Korea. I've done some last February before the whole COVID thing, and yeah, but I think the biggest thing is that this year we're just trying to get folks to raise a hand and saying like, I would like to participate. They don't really need to do the actual participation. They're just raising a hand saying like, sign me up. I want to be part of this. I am, like, you know, the president of this company, or I am the president of that country, or I am the CEO of this. It could be small, could be big, or whatever. We're getting the massive amount of people to raise a hand saying that they want to be part of this. And next year is the execution, a little bit more on execution, 2021. So we hope by the end of 2021, we will have the center ready. And if it's going to take, you know, 5 years to get all of those standards up and running, it's worth it. If it's going to take 10 years, it's better than nothing. But if we don't start now, we will never get there. And if we never get there, and we could, we will forever be regretful. And I don't want us to get that.
Are you planning to do simulation in a system you build, or probably replicating a business model that's happening and saying, using AI into it and saying what good and what problems, so that you can use the standards not only based on what feedback you're getting, but even what system is showing you that, okay, that's similar. It's like, you know, the only thing is not that I'm talking about the development system, but effectively it did help in one part that you can turn around. It's like what if scenarios. So
right.
We would play it out, and then you can see, oh my God, that could be fantastic. That could be fantastic. Oops, I better tie this up here because we don't want to allow. That's where you started. That we want to make sure those bad things are not open. The rest, literally, like open source, go enjoy. Make it.
You know, I did that in the financial world and in the software world for the last, like, pretty much 20 years, which got me to phenomenal position of where I'm at now with a lot of the companies I'm working with and folks and so on and so forth, whether it comes to self-sovereign identity or whether it comes to cryptocurrency. And then we have several nations that I'm advising of how they can get there in a way that is non-extractive, you know. Right. But I think when it comes to this one, it's too early. So the answer is like, no, we don't have any simulations at this point. Like, all we have is that vision that we hope that research center is going to have a sufficient amount of resources to build all those simulations. And so then in 6 years from now, or even if it's going to be 10 years from now, then us Homo sapien, we can look back and be like, you know, gladly we did something about it, because now we have something that cannot be repurposed, you know.
Right.
The benefit, though, when you look at some people that they are like CEOs of companies or whatnot, it's not, they don't have to wait 6 or 10 years. Right. There's some things that are being done today.
Right.
Today, the anti-AI using cryptography, for example, the anti-fake information, anti-fake news, the anti-deep fake, all of those things. There's tremendous amount of benefit that the entire media is going to be wiped out over the next couple of years and changed upside down. And folks that they're looking into how to profit today, they can. But I'm just saying, it's like the vision for the building the autonomous decentralized governance for the core AI standard, that will take time. But if people, they want to use cryptography to combat AI today and make money, there's tremendous amount of opportunities today. So depends on what they're looking for. But for the AI standards, the short answer, no, we don't have simulations, but we hope to have those.
No, I think that is actually fantastic, because you don't have to, but it's part one of the milestones you have along the path is all.
Of course,
right? It
of
is.
course.
So this, why did you choose Korea? It was what is obviously we all know anecdotally.
Yeah.
Right?
So South Korea, you have the technology infrastructure, the culture, the work ethics, geopolitical. I mean, South Korea happens to be one of those countries that can work really well with the United States, it's considered allies of the United States, and we all know that. And it's also can work very well with China. It can work with Russia. It can also work with Africa. It can work with Europe. It can work with Middle East. I mean, like, if you were to find another country that has all of those geopolitical characteristics, you probably can say Singapore, but Singapore doesn't have the economics, doesn't have the talent, so then it doesn't have the same technology infrastructure. So adding all of those components together contributed to the selection of why South Korea is to take on the lead role in this, because you need to find the Switzerland of the future. And it's no longer Switzerland. I mean, Switzerland today, it's barely keeping up with its own issues internally, debates and all of those things. So but the Switzerland of the future needs to be that country that can work with everyone and towards bringing cleaner water to everyone and better standards and whatnot. And I feel we've got what it takes in South Korea. So.
And I have to agree with you. Having dealt with them and gone many times to Seoul and Singapore, like I used to, like yourself, I traveled like crazy, and I found them to be very, very smart people, and willing to do the right things. You know, which was they didn't have a problem with not invented here factor, right?
Oh yeah, I know exactly.
Which made a big difference to us. So I think one of the things you've touched some pretty phenomenal areas. Hey, look at it. The example of pill is a very interesting and a real one, because that's where we're headed. You talked about in your background in startups and all that. You talked about the no trust, right? Which a lot of the governments are suffering from. There's no doubt about that. And so one of the things we have also established is education and awareness of people to understand where the heck is going is going to be critical, right? To make sure that they can participate and not be taken for a ride if they don't, but they do the right good things. Also, the fact that people need to start looking forward and not backwards. Yeah, we may have walked to school 40 years ago, 50 years ago. Nobody cares. Where the heck is the game today, and more importantly, where is it going tomorrow? Right. So I think what we'll have to do, from what I can see, and I liked when you put the thing about crawl, walk, run. And I think that's brilliant, because we don't necessarily do that. We run and then find out, oops, there was a
we fall, we break our neck, and be like, okay.
That's right. And so we'll have to do part two, because there are a few questions and some really key issues that we can do that and drill down. This was to cover on standards, and I think you've done a fabulous job. I mean, it's no wonder why you are leading this thing globally at IEEE, and you've done the stuff for ACM. In fact, the BIZTEK Code of Ethics we're using are all, ACM one, because we work very closely with them. They're on our board as well. And I think there's some question how it can be applied to autocratic social system, which all goes to the politics. But I think we'll have to park it for the next session. Toufi, fantastic. We're gonna get.
I saw one of the questions here. Some gentleman asked, like, explain anti-blockchain. Just want to mention quick thing here. It's more jokingly. I say it anti-blockchain because one of the protocols that I authored, it's called TODA IP, and it's a true communication protocol that works on the network. So it doesn't have any token, any coin, anything like that. But the methodology of what it uses is each and every action that happens today, it builds the cryptographic proofs that to you, and it puts it on the network in an immutable and irrefutable way where you can prove to anyone anywhere in the world that it did actually happen. But it's all on the network. There is no ledger. There is no such thing. So it is effectively a blockchain on the network, but it's not the blockchain as people, they know what the blockchain is, because my biggest disappointment with all the blockchains that are out there, that this revolution is supposed to be peer-to-peer, getting rid of the third party, getting rid of the dependence on a third party, yet they don't mind substituting that third party with like what it's called like miners or some other group that is like layer 2, layer 3, layer whatever. And that's why in the last 11 years, we didn't really get to the revolutionary thing like it was supposedly promised, but I strongly believe that we will get there. So some folks, they started using anecdotally the word that like, hey, so Toufi, you're the anti-blockchainer type of thing. So like, I'll go with it, but so I don't really mean the anti-blockchain. So that's my answer to the gentleman who asked the question there.
Yeah, I think it's Louis. Yeah, I understand. I don't think, I think there will be people who may worry because of the fact that you're doing it centrally, which makes it very powerful, far more powerful than any tools that are out there. No question about that.
You mean the decentralized aspect?
Yeah, the model you just described.
Right. Yeah. Because it's when you're building something that is like a fully decentralized, the intent there, it's to give more power to people that they want to utilize it, because then it does exactly the specific thing and nothing else. So you don't have to have an audit on an audit or in another compliance on the audit, and then below all of those you have like the administrator on the administrator, and all of those, their job is to ensure to the regulator that they're doing their job correctly. But if it can only be done correctly, then you don't need to do all of that friction, because that friction is going to cost you money and time. So that's the intent of autonomous decentralized governance at the end of the day. It's not to have to replace the, because honestly, if you were to ask me, would you rather choose paying money to the bankers or to the miners? Well, I'd rather pay the bankers. They're paying families, they've got whatever. The miners, just like miners, it's the third party. I don't want third parties. We want to reduce that friction. So any object in the universe that has a lot of friction, if you reduce the friction, you get better movements. So the goal is to increase the bar for everybody,
Right. And the good thing here, which is very interesting, is I'm here listening to you, is that one of the challenge we have about the skill sets at the other end, you don't need all the skill sets because you're simplifying it at this level here, right? Mm-hmm. So a user doesn't have today, they have to be very, savvy on this thing to be able to do, or even in the corporate world. Now they could use it. If this framework was available, you just reduce that friction too, right? If you think about it, would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I mean, the reason for the friction that exists in the world today is the lack of security, or I should say the need of security, that you would need to buy it from somebody who's providing that security. So if it is the third party that's providing that security, you need to pay the third party money and time in order to do the job. And in substituting that, it's going to cost the same. However, if the object that, like, if I'm going to send you an ownership of a car or land, or if I'm going to send you money and there's a third party that we must depend on, that third party, you and I, we're paying for it one way or another, whether we like it or not. Right. So we're paying for it money and time. So imagine there is no need for that third party, the same way that those packets, they're going back and forth to you and I. The TCP/IP packets, there's millions of them. They go back and forth, and they go almost at the speed of light. But imagine only one of those packets can contain certain thing of value that doesn't really need a third party. I'm able to transmit something. I own it today. In the next block of time, Bashir owns it, and there is no third party that nobody can change that reality. It becomes secure by design from that perspective. And this is right. When we don't no longer depend on the third party. It doesn't mean that you eliminate. There's always service layers. Third parties, amazing. That's great. You and I, we may want to buy those third parties for many different reasons. But when you don't depend on that third party. Therefore, that third party doesn't have to have like the multitude layers of like all of those compliance, and therefore doesn't have to consume enormous amount of resources, time, and whatnot. And therefore, that global machine, instead of moving very slowly, then it becomes moving a lot faster. Then you're able to do a lot better with less friction.
No, no, absolutely. That's fantastic. We've gone a little bit over time, but that's okay. We have to do part two because it's such an exciting and really engulfing, if that's the right word,
likewise
topic, right? That in the way you address it is no little wonder that, like I'm struggling to say, why am I trying to end the session? Because of the fact that, you know, we have the hour and we want to make sure.
We'll have the next one for sure.
We are going to do, it looks like we're going to need more than two, but Toufi is fantastic. Fantastic.
Thank you so much. And keep bringing phenomenal set of folks. I love your show.
No, thank you. And you're going to be a very important part of that. And there's more stuff coming your way.
Excellent.
For sure. Thank you very much.
Take care.
You have 3 hours of time to enjoy it.
Excellent. Take care.
Chat later. All the very best. God bless you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.